Welcome back, everybody, to All We Do Is Talk Pod. How you guys doing today?
Doing well, man. Happy Monday.
Yep, doing great, man.
And
Scary.
don't forget, we have a birthday boy on the panel today. Wishing a happy quarter century to Mr. Eric O'Brien.
Yes, sir.
Scary,
25.
scary.
It's only scary. It's only really scary because my birthday's next month, and I'll be turning 25. And the month after that is Moody's birthday, and he'll be turning 25. So yeah, kind of scary.
I'm the first of many.
All right. Well, today we're back for another division. We've got the AFC South off-season review, next season preview. So we're going to start with the division winner. We got the Tennessee Titans, and they had a interesting offseason. So we all know they made the trade for Julio Jones. They traded a second-round pick for Julio Jones from the Atlanta Falcons, which will probably, in my opinion, be looked as a steal. I just want to stop and talk about that. How you feel about the Julio Jones trade?
I mean, it seems like top 5 receiver value only costs you a second round pick nowadays. So I definitely think it was great value and a trade that Tennessee Titans basically had to do.
Oh yeah, I think it was an absolute steal. I mean, what are you gonna get with that second round pick? It ain't gonna be anything at any position remotely close to Julio Jones. So
Not at all.
you take that deal 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah. So, of course, he's got to stay healthy because that's kind of the biggest problem with Julio Jones. He hasn't been fully healthy probably more than twice in his career. He's always got nagging injuries. We know he doesn't practice all week until like the walkthrough days. So health is really going to determine how much value they get out of that. But so that brings up that they lost Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis, two of their bigger offensive weapons, to free agency. I'm surprised they didn't try to sign back either, but I guess they just couldn't fit it, having that they signed Tannehill and Derrick Henry last year. But they did use the money that they had to get who they signed. The other big signing they had was the Bud Dupree signing, which is a good signing because it's not fully guaranteed money. So it's voidable after this year if he doesn't make it through. So, I mean, 5 for 83, definitely an overpay. I thought Bud Dupree was one of the more overrated free agents, but they needed a pass rusher to account for the fact that they lost Jadeveon Clowney, and he didn't even bring anything. And same thing happened with Vic Beasley. Brought him in, didn't get anything out of him. They also went and got Jeff Swain and Anthony Frisker, two guys to play blocking tight end roles in their offense, which, I mean, that's the best you're going to get. Frisker had some moments last year when I watched him play. He could catch a little. Jeff Swain, he's been a blocker all his life. I think that's his role. He knows his role. They also brought in Janoris Jenkins, who got cut by the Saints, to couple with the fact that they tore down their whole secondary, let Adoree Jackson go, let Kenny Vaccaro go, let Malcolm Butler go, and they kept what's his face, Kevin Byard, who I think is a top 5 safety.
And not to mention they let Logan Ryan go last year too. So it's a complete revamping from that game, from that AFC Championship run secondary.
Yeah, and the secondary was trash last year, so I could see why they would want to revamp that. Janoris Jenkins could be a good, solid number 2, but I think their biggest hope is that they went all big risk, high risk, high reward in the first round when they took Caleb Farley, who, in my opinion, was the most talented corner in the draft. The only problem he had is that he has a back problem, and that's just really scary, especially when he's so young, already having multiple back surgeries. Hopefully, we can see him reach his prime because I did like him coming out. Really athletic, really big, really fast, really physical. Saw really good film against the guy from Notre Dame that's in Pittsburgh, Chase Claypool. He had a really good game against him a couple years back. So he showed that he could do it. They also got Jayon Brown to come back for a 1-year, $5 million deal, which is a steal considering what Miami signed the middle linebacker they had for, and what we just saw. What linebacker got signed recently?
You talk about like the guys who got like big free agent contracts?
No, the guy that re-signed with his team. I don't know.
Darius
I guess not him. We clearly know Jayon Brown's not on that level, but there was another linebacker that was like a good starter linebacker that got paid recently. To get Jayon Brown for 1 year, $5 million prove a deal, I think is a steal. He wants to cash it next year. And he also brought in Danico Autry for 3 years, $22 million. That's a little high. He might fit the system a little bit better, but I mean, they had to rebuild that defense because that defense was terrible and it cost them some games. Draft-wise, I mean, I like Farley. It's a risky pick, but I could get behind it. They
I
also
mean,
went and got a lot.
Tennessee's done that before with Joffrey Simmons, and it worked out great for them. So Tennessee definitely doesn't care about taking injury risk in the first round.
And I will say, being that their coach is from the Belichick tree, I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of those teams that spreads false rumors of how serious these injuries are.
Well,
Like, I'm not.
everyone knew Farley had back surgery. We all saw the
Yeah,
reports.
but like, it might be better. Their doctors might be telling them better stuff than they're letting out. Like with Jeffrey Simmons, everybody thought he'd be out for a whole season. He was back playing in his rookie year, like a month in, off of torn Achilles. They got Dylan Randus from North Dakota State, raw tackle. Like the player, but he's really raw. And they had to replace the fact that they threw away a first round pick last year and Isaiah Wilson, who I liked, but clearly he had off the field problems. So they don't mind taking risks. Raw player injury question mark with the first rounder, raw player with the second rounder, but both have really good film and good potential. They also got some steals in Elijah Molden from Washington, the cornerback. Had to hit that secondary hard, got to rebuild that. And I like Des Fitzpatrick, the receiver from Louisville. I think that could be a sneaky like punt return slot gadget guy. And they stole Rashard Weaver, who we didn't know until after the draft had a domestic violence problem come up. So, I mean, another risk. They like taking it. So, I mean, it's another one of those classes that we talked about, like with the Saints from the last division we went over, where it's boom or bust. So either they're going to hit and get a couple of starters, or they'll have a couple more Isaiah Wilson-like guys who are just thrown away next year. So, I mean, overall, I gave their draft a B with the potential to be with the range to creep up to an A if all the things went right, but also easily could be a D if things went wrong, because a back problem for Farley is pretty dangerous to take a risk on. But they really needed the position, so I understand why they took that risk. And free agency-wise, I included the Julio trade. I gave him a B+ because they also went and got Josh Reynolds. So I think A.J. Brown is going to step into his own as a top 10-ish receiver for sure. Julio Jones, who I don't think is a top 10 receiver anymore, could still fight to show us that he is if he could stay healthy. And Josh Reynolds is a good third option, as we saw when he played in L.A. And Bud Dupree, if they could get him to be healthy, I mean, that could help their defense. They're going to need help. Luckily, they don't play in a division full of offensive juggernauts, so they just need that defense to be solid, not elite. Now, playoff-wise, going against the Bills, the Chiefs, and the other dominant teams in the AFC,
Baltimore, Cleveland.
Yeah, they're going to need to get that defense going right if they want to return back to the AFC Championship game, which they got to in Tannehill's first year.
Yeah, Tennessee's definitely all in on offense. I think that's pretty safe to say. I feel as though the assets they gave up and the money they're about to spend on Julio probably could have just gone to their secondary or their defense in general. But they decided to go for the big play. They needed a number 2 next to Brown since Corey Davis is gone. And Julio, he made the only reason we wouldn't call him a top 10 receiver is because of injuries. When Julio was out there and playing, I don't think you can name 10 receivers better than Julio Jones.
Yeah.
So as far as Tennessee goes, I just don't know if we could trust that defense. I mean, we expect the offense to be one of the 10-5 best in the league for sure. But unless I don't see another year of Derrick Henry getting 2,000 yards, because nobody's ever done that twice. So with expected regression from Derrick Henry and that defense, it's going to be interesting for Tennessee this year. I still think they're the division favorite, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how they pan out against the actual contenders in the AFC.
Your thoughts on Tennessee, Eric?
I mean, yeah, I think that they should be the clear favorite to win the division. I think with the new injuries coming out with Indianapolis, that kind of knocks them down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, having Julio Jones to replace Corey Davis is huge. Also, the addition, getting back Taylor Lewan from his ACL will be huge to put him back at left tackle.
Yeah, he's a great run-blocking left tackle, and Derrick Henry is running really good behind those guys. I think their offensive line is a weakness, though, pass-blocking-wise.
Oh, yeah. But, like,
especially without Conklin.
Yeah, but they're a run first, so, like, you want their run to be what their bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what scares me is I think they're going to try to move towards being more 50-50 or get to that 60-40 pass-heavy when they go and get a guy like Julio Jones. But I mean, we're pretty sure we know what we're gonna get. They did lose their offensive coordinator to head coach job, Arthur Smith, to Atlanta, which will open a question mark of how efficient their offense will be, because he did a good job with the play calling. But it'll be heavy outside zone runs and play action bombs to AJ Brown and Julio in between. So I mean, they got a pretty basic offense. So hopefully they could add some other stuff to stop being stagnant when the run is a little slowed down. And their guys. And last year, Corey Davis wasn't a guy who was just creating elite separation. So hopefully, if Julio Jones is there to take some coverage away from AJ Brown, that could create open up some more separation for their guys. And so if they do have to pass more, that'll help that too. And getting Taylor Lewan back at left tackle, all pro caliber player, is definitely going to help with that.
Absolutely.
Well, as you said, segue into Indianapolis. We can move on to the Colts now.
Yeah, so Indianapolis, I mean, their whole offseason was predicated on the Carson Wentz trade primarily. Gave up a third and a compensatory second-round pick, which, depending on how many games he plays, it can go to a first. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth the risk for the Colts, especially if he's hurt like he is now and he can't play this percentage of games to make it a first. It's absolutely worth it to take a flyer on Carson Wentz. Most of their other moves were in re-signing guys. I was surprised that they re-signed Marlon Mack after an Achilles injury, because Achilles injuries are really hard to come back from. They signed Xavier Rhodes back to a one-year deal. I think this is his second one-year deal with the Colts. Signed T.Y. back for $10 million. So you gave weapons around Carson Wentz, or at least kept him. But with Michael Pittman Jr., T.Y., Jonathan Taylor, that should be a good enough core to make you competitive in this division.
I'm also a big fan of, excuse me real quick, Paris Campbell from Ohio State.
What about Zach Pascal from ODU? Got to give him a shout out.
Give him a shout out, but him and Pittman play the same type of game. Paris from Ohio State.
Yeah,
he brings a different dynamic that they might be missing.
But he's been injured.
He was hurt a lot.
Yeah,
a lot. Yeah.
Injuries, even back to college, injuries have been his problem and why he was in the second round, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he fell to the second round that year. Their draft, I'm never high on Michigan guys. Kwity Paye, definitely their best player on that team, but I think he'll be all right. I don't think he'll be anything special, but drafting 21st overall with your first pick, I mean, you're not expecting to get one of the top guys. Drafted Sam Ehlinger in the 6th round. Texas is not back. And yeah, I mean, they got another wide receiver in the 7th round from Charleston. So, I mean, all right draft. I'd give them a C for the draft, honestly. But, their GM, I forget his name. He has a history of doing really well in the draft. So
Chris Ballard. And people laughed at them for the Darius Leonard pick. I was watching a Freezing Coles take tweet, and they were like, "That's the worst pick of that draft." And he just re-signed for $100 million. I think he's a little overrated. Top 10 linebacker. How high is he in the top 10? I don't know, but he's always making plays. So nothing against Darius Leonard, great player.
Yeah, and with Quentin Nelson suffering the same injury as Wentz, it'll be funny to see the comparison of the return, because I think Quentin Nelson is getting back way before Carson Wentz.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's the insane motherfucker that he is. And
he's luckily for him, he's an old lineman, so if his foot is good enough to go, he'll be ready to go. For a quarterback, you're gonna have to use that foot for planting and throwing, and it could mess up with your accuracy. So I'm pretty sure Nelson would
foot and everything, but
for drop sets, but most of the time he's gonna be going forward mauling in his best phase of his game, and nobody gets past Quentin Nelson anyway if he just stays there, be the brick wall that he is. So I think he'll be back. I think they'll both be back by week 4.
Yeah,
Nelson might start the season though.
Yeah, with the tough schedule that they have going, it's gonna be brutal for them to begin. They got well, no, that's preseason. They start with Seattle, home. That's probably an L. Then they play the Rams, and then at Tennessee, at Miami, at Baltimore. That's a brutal schedule to start with.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially if you lose your quarterback and your best offensive lineman, that's tough.
Then you go week 6 in Houston, and then you go to San Francisco. So it's going to be a tough beginning, but they can finish strong. Absolutely, they could rattle off a good amount.
Yeah, they can. If Eason / Ellinger can help them survive the first
Nick
2 months
Foles.
of the season,
the name you're looking for is Nick Foles.
They can't.
No, I'm joking.
They are the
I know they can. I'm
team
joking.
in the
I'm
NFL
joking.
that can't trade for Nick Foles. Every
I'm
other
joking.
team can, but them.
That was literally
the name you're looking.
Once.
Yeah, if they do that, that'd be a bad.
They ruined Carson Wentz. They ruined him. It'd be done before he even got the chance to see a snap for them. They have anybody else, but they can't go get Nick Foles.
Probably Jimmy Garoppolo.
That's a good one.
I think they'll go get Jimmy Garoppolo.
Do you think
if they can?
Do you think Carson Wentz will want to be back by week 3 when they play at Tennessee? Do you think that's a goal?
Whenever we know he's a little fragile, but whenever he's ready,
he's
play.
100%. You can't bring him back any earlier than that. He's such a proven injury risk.
Yeah. He likes to play recklessly, so he's gonna put his body at risk. So he's not gonna play until he's fully healthy. But I think he'll be back by week 4 at the latest. That's looking at. I split the difference on the injury and take the middle. I'll give Carson a plus a week or 2, and I'll take a week or 2 away from Nelson because I think he'll be back first for sure.
You think he'll be back by week 1?
I think Nelson's back by week 1. I don't think
Nelson can be back. Yeah, Nelson can be back. I'm sure. I mean, like I said, offensive line wise, as long as he's good enough to go out there and shoot it up with some shots, they'll get him out there as soon as possible because they have no chance of winning really if their offensive line's not performing at an elite level. You could win with some backup quarterback play and good strong running.
But that's the strongest unit for sure.
Yeah. But they're probably not going to – I'll tell you one thing. Carson Wentz won't be back before Nelson because there's no reason to put Carson Wentz out there behind the offensive line that isn't performing up to stuff. So I know that for sure. Either they come back the same week or Nelson comes back a couple weeks before.
Yeah, I mean, they'll still rely heavy on Jonathan Taylor. I think this is going to be a real show it again here for Jonathan Taylor. Yeah,
get him in your fantasy leagues.
Yep. Because he can catch the ball, he can run the ball between the tackles. He's a jack of all trades, master of none, jack of all trades.
I think he's elite between the tackles. I think he's elite between the tackles, and they said he couldn't catch coming out, but he even proved that he was good at catching dump offs last year. So he's proven himself a lot, and I was high on him.
So I'd give the Colts C+, B-, B- probably, because I mean, with Phillip Rivers retiring, Carson Wentz is someone who can fill that void. Even they're not committed to him long term, right? How long is Wentz's contract?
Probably the next 2. Luckily, all the guaranteed money is dumped onto Philly's head. Yeah. So they probably got a 2-year commitment this year and next year, and then resign and then worry about extension if it works out. About the same type of thing you're looking at with Matthew Stafford when he went to LA, where it's we're gonna get a 2-year grace period before we have to extend him. It's a shame because I would have loved to see how Carson would have come out, but I think it might be a blessing in disguise for Indianapolis because they won't have to give up that first-round pick, and then when he comes back and they have the softer side of their schedule, they could build some momentum that goes into next season, and they could keep building, and they'll have to push it off a year because they could have probably had a good team this year that could have competed for the AFC South. But if he misses 4 games to 6 games and Nelson misses 2 to 4 games, that's probably going to set them behind the 8 ball more than they need to, especially since Tennessee is the team they're playing early. So that kind of sucks for the schedule-wise. So, sucks that they got the injuries, but I guess we'll go on to another team that's even in a worse position. We'll go on to Houston Texans.
Houston's in the worst position maybe in NFL history as far as their entire the Bronx, the entire thing of it. They have a GM that nobody likes, especially their quarterback who don't want to be there. I don't know if they hate Nick Caserio. I've heard some glowing reviews about him coming out of New England guys and Sean McVay. Some people like him. I haven't heard a lot of people, because if you're not willing to acquiesce to your quarterback, then I think people around the league tend to give you a dirty look. But they also have a new head coach in David Culley from Baltimore,
Now that I'll
he's in
question that.
another awful situation that he finds himself in. I also that must have just been their guy, because I didn't really see why.
I'll tell you one thing. He's got beef with Steve Smith. Steve Smith does not like him. I was listening to a story about the Pro Bowl that one time he disrespected Steve Smith Sr. at a Pro Bowl, and Steve Smith holds a grudge against him. And that's Steve Smith Sr. like. Yeah, but he's screwed. He's screwed.
Yeah,
he's in a bad spot.
So as far as like their draft, they had 3 total draft picks. They took Davis Mills, the quarterback from Stanford. I think that's where Davis Mills came from. They took Nico Collins, the receiver, and they took Brevin Jordan, the tight end, in the 5th. That's it. That's their whole draft. They got a quarterback that they might be a starter, develop backup guy down the road, another receiving option, and a tight end option that has a lot of development that he needs to make. So their draft is really was basically non-impactful to their team this year. All their picks went to Laramie Tunsil, and obviously that's not helping them be any better as a team as they are. So,
and that's not to add on that they also traded away picks to get Deshaun Watson. So the last few years they've traded away a lot of future first-round picks.
Rough drafting in the last couple years, rough drafting in the years ahead. Houston's in a bad spot when it comes to like adding cheap young talent to their future, and it's going to be rough. As far as their free agency goes, they lost basically the face of their franchise in J.J. Watt. They lost their starting center, Nick Martin. They lost one of their best front 7 linebacker guys, Bernard McKinney. So already a defense that was league worst against the run last year, that played Derrick Henry twice, is going to be even worse with another 2 games of Derrick Henry coming up. So that's just a lot to deal with. They made some additions. They were kind of active in free agency. They added Tyrod Taylor, who, depending on what Deshaun Watson does, could be their starter or could be a decent backup. We don't know.
And you know how I feel about Tyrod Taylor. I don't need to see stop with Tyrod Taylor. Just let him go. I don't need to see no more starting Tyrod Taylor. We've had enough.
I just hope there's no more doctors gunning for him.
That was a one-time thing for the better of the team. Sorry, Tyrod.
Yeah, and so when Deshaun Watson gets his cases dropped, all of a sudden Tyrod Taylor go get another bad shot from a doctor to get him off the field. Let's see. They added Mark Ingram, another running back, because no one likes running backs more than the Houston Texans. It seems. I don't really understand.
They let go of Duke Johnson, so they needed a guy to play the position. They're going to run that Baltimore Ravens offense that David Culley brought over, so he brought over a guy that he knows. He brought over guys he knows. Like Tyrod Taylor, he brought over a guy he knows.
Help with the locker room culture in a locker room that's going to be pretty disastrous. I guess that'll give them a plus for their additions, but still not great. They added Malik Collins, now journeyman D tackle from the Vegas Raiders. They added Mr. We're not going 0-16 Christian Kirksey to come help with the linebacker spot. They added Marcus Cannon, the OL from New England. That's not a bad pickup for them to help continue to stabilize that offensive line. And they added Shaq Lawson, pass rusher from Miami. So
they also traded for him. Yeah, they gave up McKinney for him. Yeah.
So actually, I'm not. I didn't hate what they did overall in free agency. I thought J.J. Watt's time in free agency in Houston had basically run its course. Nick Martin was he was a good center, but not something that can be replaced.
Replacement level.
I thought they added a couple starters and Shaq Lawson and Marcus Cannon in free agency. So overall, I gave the free agency a B. The draft gets an F because they couldn't do anything. They gave up picks for Larry Tunsil and David Johnson. So you really can't give them so much praise for their draft. It wasn't great. Overall offseason, F. They screwed over their quarterback. Their quarterback hates him now. They gave up a bunch of draft picks for a team that's not good. They lost the face of their franchise basically. They're not a lot of positives in Houston. They have the worst roster in the NFL. I would probably predict them to finish 4th in this division pretty clearly, pretty easily. Whether Deshaun Watson
on one caveat, if Deshaun Watson plays, they have a chance to win 6 games.
They won 4 last year, and they had a better roster last year. So
yeah, luckily they get to play. They might get to play the Colts without Carson Wentz, and
they get an extra game. So maybe that'll help push them to a fifth or a sixth win. But I don't expect a whole lot from Houston. Whether Watson plays or not, this isn't a team that's going to be competing for the playoffs. They would probably like to be picking number 1 overall next year. I think that's what Houston would prefer. So, yeah, Houston, rough situation. What are your guys' thoughts?
The only way they could save their season if Deshaun Watson suits up and plays for them, and they could win maybe 6 or 7 games off of his talent alone. That's the only scenario where things go decently for them. Everything else looks at like 0-17, first team to pull it off. That's a bad roster. That coach, I don't think they're coach. They got a guy that's coaching, but like, is he really?
He's unproven. We'll call him unproven.
Unproven, or the only guy that was willing to take the job because it's the only job David Culley was ever going to get. That's probably more what it was. He's beyond unproven. Like, yeah, good luck to him. I'll let Eric take it away from here. There's not much to really say.
I mean, I think for them to win 5-6 games is going to take Superman of Deshaun Watson and him not get hurt and be unbelievable, which he can. But Carolina Panthers, trade for the man. Yeah, but just a bad situation. Just terrible, terrible, terrible. And
yeah, it's not a whole lot to say about Houston. They're going to be picking in the top 5 next year. I think we can move on.
Yeah. Move on.
Yeah.
All right, so this is going to be my dark horse division winner next year because they have the guy who has basically never lost throughout most of his career in the regular season, and that's the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. I like Jacksonville a lot, actually, because obviously getting Trevor Lawrence in tow, generational talent at the QB position. He's got a new head coach, obviously in Urban Meyer, who will be probably is the best position to put a scheme around him to make him the most successful. So I think Jacksonville expectations should definitely be higher than Houston's going in. For their draft, they got obviously Trevor Lawrence, #1 overall pick. A pick I didn't like as much later in the first round, but still a really good player in Travis Etienne to pair him with Trevor Lawrence. They took Tyson Campbell at the top of the second. They took the tackle Walker Little, and I only went through their third round. They took Andre Sisco, the safety from Syracuse. So they had 5 picks in the top 65, which for a team as bad as they are, that makes a lot of sense why they got all that ammo in the top of the draft. And they used it to add a few guys who could easily be either immediate step-in starters or developmental starters down the road. As far as their free agency goes,
I'll just pause right there. Apparently, Campbell's lighting it up in camp, and they're going to push Henderson out the door for him.
I think I heard the Henderson thing is more off the field, which is surprising because Urban Meyer has problems with people in their off the field things. That just don't sound right to me. So it's got to be something.
And he's a Florida guy too.
Yeah, so it's got to be something crazy going on with CJ Henderson for Urban Meyer to be ready to just push him out the door. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, Tyson Campbell out of Georgia, liked him a lot, definitely. As for their free agency goes, they added Marvin Jones Jr., they added Malcolm Brown, Roy Robertson-Harris, Damian Wilson, Carlos Hyde, and Philip Dorsett. So they added, they really hit all the different pieces. Marvin Jones and Philip Dorsett are going to add some speed and some playmaking to that receiving core. Malcolm Brown and Roy Robertson-Harris are quality run-stuffing D tackles to help Jacksonville with one of their league worst run defenses in a division that sees Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor 4 times a year. Damian Wilson, he's been a starter on the Chiefs' last 2 Super Bowl teams. So Damian Wilson has shown he's a replacement level, but like low-end starting caliber linebacker. And they brought in Carlos Hyde, who's just one of those quality backup running backs throughout the league. Ohio State guy, played under Urban Meyer. The fit makes a lot of sense. They lost Keelan Cole, the receiver. They lost Al Woods at their interior defensive line. They lost Chris Conley as well, another receiver, which makes sense why they added 2 more in free agency. And they lost their longtime secondary cornerback, Rashawn Melvin. So Jacksonville has seems like they got some of those like long-standing vets out who've been on a lot of the bad teams, and they've kind of like try to infuse it with some youth and some veteran guys from other teams who have been on decent programs. So overall, I like Jacksonville a lot, actually. I think Jacksonville should definitely be – I think Jacksonville's going to be the second best team in this division at worst, just after the Carson Wentz injury. And I think that if Tennessee's defense falls apart and Julio Jones is dealing with a lot of injuries and the Arthur Smith loss backfires on Tennessee, Jacksonville might be sliding into this division. It's not a great division overall, just off of the Houston situation, the injuries in Indianapolis, the poor defense in Tennessee. This isn't one of the stronger divisions in the NFL, in my opinion. And if Trevor Lawrence is everything we expect him to be, Jacksonville can be a sneaky team in this division.
Absolutely. I mean, I like them. I like because of their youth. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence adds a huge part to that. Being a cheap quarterback, like if they can build in the next 2-3 years, this is their window. If they can build it properly, that's a big if. But I think Travis Etienne, I think the chemistry with him and Lawrence will help them out to move into the NFL. Yeah,
I like the system that they both of them are from a college system, and they're going to be running a college system in the NFL, and that's what I love about them the most. But you could continue, Eric.
But yeah, I mean that's really all I had.
Okay, I mean they could be sneaky. Now I do believe Tennessee and Indianapolis are better because they have experience of doing that in the NFL, like being playoff teams. Both were playoff teams last year, and I just don't think Urban Meyer is just going to jump in and turn the Jacksonville Jaguars around right away. Next year is probably going to be their year, in my opinion. But if things break for them and these injuries in Indianapolis turn out worse than expected, and Houston is a dumpster fire as expected, and Tennessee's secondary and some injuries hit Tennessee, they could win. But that's going to turn it into one of those NFC East-like races where it's the race to 7, 8, or 9 wins.
Yeah, that's how they would do it, in my opinion.
Yeah. But I guess we'll move on to over-under. All right, so these over-unders for each of these teams. So what we got for Tennessee?
We've got – sorry, I was on division winners. Just for over-under, like, wins?
Yeah.
They're in alphabetical order, not division. For
Yes.
Jacksonville, we got 6.5. That's a tough.
I'm gonna hit.
I'm hitting the over.
I'm hitting the
Who's
under.
gonna hit the over?
I'm
gonna hit the. I'll do even. It's a cop out, but that's
How you can't even 6.5.
Because that's a 6 or 7 win team. Like I hit the under, but I wouldn't. I'd go no bet. Because there's nothing to gain there. That's a 6 or 7 win team.
I'm not touching the Jacksonville Jaguars win total. But
I'm gonna bet all of these over unders that I go with. So I'm gonna bet when I make my bet, I will bet the under.
I take the over.
You see, my terminology. I would, if I'm not gonna bet it, and I'll let y'all know if I'm taking it. The Indianapolis Colts over under is set at 8.5.
That sucks, but if you look at their schedule, 8.5. I'm gonna take the over. I think they're a 9-win team. I think their back end schedule is pretty easy. If you look at it, I'll take the over.
How many games do they have to win out of that first 5 for them to hit that over?
Even if they just win one, as long as they win at least 1 or 2 of them, they'll be fine. Their back end schedule, if you look at it, it's really easy. Like it's got Jacksonville,
they got
and Houston on it.
They got
the problem is, I think if Wentz misses those games, I don't know how they win any of them. Like Jacob Eason about to knock off one of those teams, and then have to see Tennessee twice.
I don't think Jacob Eason. I don't think they're going into the season with Sam Ehlinger, Jacob Eason, and the dude from the Packers who was trash.
We're a
as
month
their
from the
quarterback.
season. Who they about to add?
Jimmy Garoppolo. In a couple weeks, they'll go get Jimmy Garoppolo or Nick Foles. Come on, we all know it.
They can't. They can't.
We know they can't, but desperate times call for desperate measures. It is what it is. Next, but I'll take the over. How about you, Eric? How you feel?
I'll take the under. I think they'll be like an 8-win team.
I think that's another.
I think 7
with their schedule and the injuries, it's just 9 seems like a hard number for them to get to. If they were healthy, I think I'd definitely take them to get the over, though.
The Houston Texans.
I don't really care what it is. Hit the under. hit the under until you see whether Deshaun Watson is playing for them or not. If Deshaun Watson's not playing for them,
Deshaun Watson played 16 games for them last year with a better roster, and they won 4 games.
it was the same roster for being real. It was the same
is
roster.
Will Fuller still there? Will Fuller
yeah, it's a
still
word.
there?
Okay.
JJ Watt
Okay.
still there?
Don't forget that
roster sucks, bro.
They lost. They look with that terrible roster. They still lost 3 games on like the goal line because their center can't snap the ball and guys were fumbling.
And now the backup center is going to be the starter.
Unless if Deshaun Watson plays, I'll hit the over. If he's not playing for them, which I don't think he's going to play for them, but I think he will play for them. I don't really know right now. We're getting closer.
I don't think he plays the whole season. He gets a couple games out the way and they trade him, or they shut him down, or he shuts himself down. That's all.
But more than likely, I'll put in an under bet for a Deshaun Watson less Houston Texans. Over, if he plays over, they'll win 6 or 7 games with him.
All right, so on to the Tennessee Titans. Their over-under is 9.
Yeah, it's an easy over. It's an easy over.
Yeah, I think they barely hit it, but yeah, I think they're a 9-10 win team.
And all of these, I'm sorry, Vegas got these on the money. Like most of these will probably hit exactly because Vegas always wins. That's
the
what they do.
house always wins, baby. The house always wins.
They got to keep.
But how you feel about Tennessee? Over under, Eric?
I'd probably go over. I mean, I think they'll beat Houston twice. I think they're at least winning 1 against Jacksonville, if not both.
And the Colts too.
They're lucky that they got the Colts
early. So like that's 6 wins right there.
Yeah, and maybe Jacksonville steals the game for them, but they're probably if the way that things are lining up for them, they're probably going to get 6 easy wins off their division, which you always love to see that on the schedule when an injury happens. But division wise, how we going to rank them? I'll go first. I'm going to go with Tennessee, Indianapolis, Jacksonville. Deshaun Watson less Houston Texans. If Deshaun Watson plays a full season for them, I think they'll probably be a better team than Jacksonville, but barely.
Okay, for me, Tennessee, I think is the clear favorite. I'm gonna take Jacksonville to be number 2 because of the Carson Wentz injury, and I think Trevor Lawrence is gonna continue to be the generational guy he's always been. Indianapolis is 3 because I think Houston is 4 no matter what. So that's why I gotta pick. I don't see a scenario, even if Deshaun Watson shows up and he's Peyton Manning, Tom Brady with rushing ability, that team can't win more than 3 or 4.
Luckily for him, like we said in our quarterback rankings, I would love to see him in that Lamar Jackson system, and that's what David Culley is going to be bringing to them. So if they do win a bunch of games, it'll be because Deshaun Watson's killing it in that system. That's the only scenario where they are having a decent season. Like they're not going to win. They're not going to be over 500, and 500 don't exist anymore. But they won't be a winning team. There's no chance of that whatsoever. But if they get great elite play from Deshaun Watson, they might win 7 games. But I guess that's it for the AFC South, and we'll be back next time for the NFC West. So I'll catch y'all next time. All right.